We're gonna handle everything in this video. That's right, every single hot button topic of modern Overwatch. The death of the Overwatch League, 5v5 ruining tank, and even flawed hero designs. And to do that, we're not going to talk about any of it. Instead, let's tackle the real underlying issue that is killing Overwatch. Many of you probably realize what it is because it's been staring us straight in the face for a very long time, but we're all ignoring it. And I'm not going to continue to beat around the bush anymore. I'm just going to talk about it because I think it's important. The issue that is killing Overwatch is the community's involvement with toxicity towards each other. If I'm being honest, I suck at this. I am no poster boy of being a flawless human being that never reaches, gets to an angry point and lashes out at teammates. I screw up all the time, and I promise you, I'm not proud of it. But when you really think about all of these things, whether it was the Overwatch League dying and what happened and what caused it and whether or not the Overwatch Champions series is even going to be financially worth it in many people's minds, 5v5 ruining tank, 5v5 versus 6v6, that whole conversation, and whether or not Mauga, Kiri, Sojourn have flawed hero design. Sojourn, I don't think as much. I just feel like she was, until she got nerfed, she was a pretty hot topic. I really think that this issue goes much deeper and much further than Overwatch. I think that the underlying issue actually stems and is applicable to other areas of our lives. And that's probably going to sound like a bunch of overdramatic, hyped BS from an Overwatch creator. And I get where you're coming from because there's a ton of them out there who just rage bait, just say things for clicks. That's not who I am. Societally speaking, we have gotten to the place across the world where we are no longer willing to agree to disagree. And I don't care what the topic is. It can be literally some of the hardest conversations like politics, faith, anything like those two things alone. I guarantee you some of you just went, oh, I hope he doesn't bring it up. I brought it up. Rip it off like a band-aid and get over it. Because here's my deal. You can completely disagree with me, who is a very Christian conservative. You can be a liberal and a very proud member of the LGBTQIA+ community. And my promise to you is that I will never be disrespectful to you because of our differences. Despite our differences even. And when it comes to Overwatch and all of the issues that the game has right now, I think the same thing can be applied. And again, this is an area that I struggle in as a creator because I get constant comments that are degrading, that are awful, that are you're never gonna make it, you're plat after 200 days, not of course remembering that 140 of those days were spent in support where I peaked in Masters and averaged high diamond. And in those 140 days, I averaged roughly 15 to 20 hours a week of actual gameplay. No, instead of looking for the opportunity to pour into what I'm doing, we would rather detract from it, degrade me, whatever it is. And that needs to stop because I know for a fact I am not the only one who is on the receiving end of this. Even more well-known Overwatch creators also get it all the time. Let's use Flats as the poster boy of Overwatch creators, I think. He is a great example. Dude gets harassed for being overweight. Are you kidding me? Dude's insanely good at Overwatch and all you have left to degrade him on is his weight, so you go after that. This is my point. Instead of focusing on the things that we can use to unite us generally, whether it's Overwatch or otherwise, we focus on the things that make every person different and the fact that those differences are so pivotal to our ability to respect them that we focus on them. And I know this is going to sound like a rant. I'm sure that it is, and it probably is, but this is something that I haven't been able to find the right script, the right words. I'm just speaking from the heart, and I hope it shows. We have got to get back to the place where we can look at each other regardless of our agreements or disagreements and be kind to each other. Do you think that counter swapping wins you more games? Great. I disagree with you. I can prove to you in many ways why I think this is a less skilled way of playing the game. It looks more like rock, paper, scissors than it does an actual skilled esport. But here's the deal. Counter swapping does have a place. There's a fine line, and I think this is another thing we would find is that in many of our arguments, our divisions, our whatever, there's going to be this middle ground where everybody can kind of agree. Even if it's just disagree on the fringe things, but the bulk of this can be agreed upon. I'm going to use the 5v5, 6v6 conversation as a great example. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about it earlier. I guess I'm going to. Could 6v6 save Overwatch? Sure, of course it could. There's a possibility that just by bringing that in and rebalancing the game accordingly, that it could be fixed. Yeah, that's absolutely true. But is there a way to fix 5v5 as well and keep it in the way that it is? I do think there is. I think there is a both and, not an either or, where either direction you can find value. Now here's the thing, if you enjoyed 6v6 more because you played it and you really just missed those days, I respect that. I didn't. And I always put that disclaimer out there in this conversation because I didn't experience it. But notice at no point have I said, oh, I just think 5v5 is better because 6v6 was terrible. I never played it. I won't. You will not find me saying that. Do I think the Overwatch Champions Series is going to be more profitable than the Overwatch League was? I think there's a lot of potential for it if people really start realizing the model that was set forth, which is a sponsorship heavy model, and start creating teams that are brands just as much as they are teams. And going to the flawed hero thing, I think that the middle ground there is, yeah, there are some heroes that have some very flawed kits. So the ones that have the most flawed kits, let's have them have the longest cooldowns. Great example. This is an extreme, obviously, stick with me. Look at Baptiste. Baptiste is still in a place where I believe he is probably one of the strongest, if not the strongest, supports in the game. Keep in mind, it's a little bit of a bias because I was a one-trick Baptiste player for the first 140 days of my journey. He has essentially 3 health pools, his primary one, his left shift that gives him burst of health, and then his immortality field. But here's the thing, the immortality field especially is on one of the longest cooldowns in the game as far as I'm aware. Kiriko is another good example. She should not be able to swift step out of every single fight as much as she can. And here's the deal, if you don't agree with me, guess what? I don't hate you. It's okay that you don't agree. I could go on and on and on about the countless examples of areas that we could all just come together and really unite and create a community that's worth being a part of again. I wasn't a big part of the community in Overwatch 1. I think I may have played a handful of games with a good friend of mine who online I've always referred to him as Ping, and I just don't remember it very much. But what I will tell you is every single person that I have spoken to about Overwatch 1, there's this nostalgic reverence for what it was. And I don't think it was because of 6v6 entirely. I do think there is plenty of space for the fact that 6v6 was nostalgic for many people, but I actually think there was this community that was excited about a game that was happening in 2016. Overwatch 2 comes out at the end of, I believe, 2022. By that time, the game was already kind of on a decline because of a very, very stale meta, from what I understand. People just kind of gave up on it, I think. And it was at that point when Blizzard made a couple of very pivotal mistakes that I still think they need to own up to. Them completely scrapping the PvE project and just throwing it out the window after promising it and hyping it up and building Overwatch 2 around it. Was a terrible decision, and that is part of what started this horrible culture that we have now. At the end of the day, a culture of a video game, a workplace, or any kind of group of people is largely determined by the results of its leadership. My community online is very much a reflection of how I behave, and I know that, and I wear that at the top of my head all the time because, well, there's a lot of room now. I shaved my hair, so there's a lot of room there. But in all seriousness, guys, we need to get back to the place where we create a community that is worth being a part of. I understand that the Overwatch developers at Blizzard have made plenty of mistakes, but I also want to recognize that in the more recent past, the Balance team especially has been pulling through tremendously, and even the directors' blogs, directors' takes, I always forget what the terminology is there, that Aaron has been putting together. I've been really impressed with how transparent they're trying to be. They are trying, and we need to give them some credit for that because at the end of the day, Aaron and the entire team, every single person on that team is a human being. And I can promise you, they make mistakes and they know it. Now, before all of you go screaming in the comments about which mistakes they made, that's not the point of what I'm saying. Just like in ranked, you can't control what your teammates do. You can only control what you do. Even if you stack with your friends, you still can't control what they do. You just have an easier time getting along with them. We can't control what Blizzard and the developers are going to do with the game, but we can control what the community looks like. Don't get me wrong, there's a place to call out the developers and, Blizzard and the Balance team and all of that because, you have things like Mauga being released into competitive for 2 weeks in a broken state and they never did anything about it. That was a problem. I totally understand and agree with you. But it's how we call it out. It's how we conduct ourselves. It's how we have these conversations in an online space that matter. So here's my deal. I am going to own up front that I have been ultra defensive because my ego has gotten in the way of me listening to what you guys are telling me. Now, some of you, I'm going to be honest, are not worth listening to. I'm just going to be real. It's not because you're a terrible person. It's because you're sharing advice that is very clearly contrary to what 90% of people in the community would say. And if you can get a group of people in the Overwatch community to agree on something and 90% of them agree, I'm going to go with them, no offense. But the majority of you are just sharing your thoughts, your opinions, and I would argue the majority of you actually care about the journey. Even those that are being derogatory pricks online, you would not have taken the time to comment, and if at some level you didn't hope that I would succeed. And you may not ever admit it, you may not even realize it in your head, but I could promise you, you wouldn't have taken the time. Yeah, you just be negative? Sure, but why? There's plenty of other things you can do on the internet to be negative. You can go be political and be negative. Why are you on this random, very relatively small creator? Why are you commenting on my stuff? Because you, at some level, hope that I make it to prove to you that people that have the odds against them can make it. I recognize and I'm very real about where I am, personally. I'm in plat, honestly just deranked gold recently, happens, and I am married. I have 2 children and another one on the way. So I have very limited time. So when I succeed at this, you are not gonna find me going, ha ha, losers on the internet, I made it. It's not what you're going to find. What you're going to find is me saying to those of you who thought that I couldn't make it, here I am. Despite the odds, despite everything that was thrown at me, I made it. If you're with me and you see a world where Overwatch becomes the iconic community it's capable of being, I ask you to just do one small thing. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications because I'm going to lead the charge.